Chinese people are obsessed with food, which is probably why they're so good at making it. In fact, I've always seen them as kind of like the Italians of Asia, and if you ever eat with Chinese-speaking friends, it's going to leave a deep impression on people when you can describe what you're eating in Chinese in a really natural way. So let's go through the essential vocabulary and phrases you'll need with examples so you'll be ready to impress some Chinese people next time you go out for a meal. Let's start with the very basics. 好吃. If you've been learning Chinese for any period of time, you almost certainly know this one already. It means delicious, and you can also adjust it to your liking to say, for example, 超好吃, meaning super delicious. Or you could say 不好吃 if you don't like something. Or you could say 不太好吃 if something is not gross, but just not your cup of tea. For example, you could say 我的这碗面, my bowl of noodles, 不太好吃, doesn't taste that good.
海潮做的蒜泥白肉特别好吃，是的，是的。你尝尝。
哎，我尝尝，我尝尝，我尝尝。
怎么样？
好吃。你快吃。你们觉得我做甜品好吃吗？
好吃啊！其他咖啡店的甜品跟我们店的根本没法比。好吃，好吃。
There are some other bonus phrases that are more general sort of ways of talking about food, which I'm going to share with you as bonuses at the end of this video. But let's move on to the three most important factors when it comes to the culinary arts in China, which is 色, 香, and 味. 色 refers to the color of the food, the way it looks, the way it's presented. 香 refers to the scent, the smell, and 味 refers to the flavor. So let's start with the way things look, the 色. There are two main words that you need to master here. One is the word for colorful, which is 鲜艳, and the other one is 单调, dull. 这道菜的颜色好鲜艳，那道菜看起来太单调了。
这次我增加了上面红色、黄色、绿色，看起来就很鲜艳的颜色。哇，好香哦！
Another kind of general word that you'll want to use to describe food specifically is the word 开胃, which literally means open appetite or appetizing. 这些菜看起来好开胃哦。
被冰水浸过的面片不仅滑爽，而且特别的筋道，配上酸酸辣辣的调料汁儿，夏天吃起来特别的开胃。
Now let's move on to the next category of smell, the scent of food, 香. In fact, that is the word that we use most of the time. 香 means something smells good, and you can actually use this word to describe how things taste as well. So when you're eating something, you say, oh, 好香哦. But this is the word that you'll hear when someone, say, walks into your kitchen as you're cooking a nice meal, and they'll go, 好香.
好香啊，好好吃哟。
And then the opposite of 香 would be 臭, which is smelly. But this is not necessarily always bad. You know, 臭豆腐, for example, is something I really like, and it's literally called smelly tofu, and it stinks. It's really pungent, but it also tastes really nice. 那道臭豆腐好臭啊。
闻着是挺臭，吃起来是贼香。
This next word is one that you'll definitely hear if I'm ever cooking. It's called 糊, which is what you use to describe the burnt smell. So, for example, 这烤肉是不是糊了？
没有糊味啊，并不失败，我觉得很浓郁啊，葱香、蛋香、奶香。
And the final word I want to share with you regarding smell is one that I really hate as someone that is not into seafood whatsoever, and it is 腥, and this means fishy. So, for example, 这道蒸鱼的腥味好重. This steamed fish has a really strong or heavy fishy smell.
闻上去一股腥味儿，肯定不够新鲜。
Now let's move on to the third and biggest main aspect of describing food in Chinese, 味 or flavor, taste. First we have 酸, which means sour. So for example, 这柠檬茶太酸了吧? This lemon tea is too sour.
酸黄瓜，尝尝。
这个不错，
哎，来尝尝。
尝尝。
哎呀，干什么？这是给你嫂子腌的。
我试试毒。
你这，哇，好酸！就说让你别吃。
好吃，好吃，好吃，太好吃了。
多吃多吃，来，吃。
Then next we have sweet or 甜. So for example, 这些蛋糕好甜，好吃但容易胖。
还不错的，真的挺好吃的。它那个肉很甜哎，就很新鲜。
Next we have 苦 or bitter. So for example, 上了年纪的人才懂得品尝苦瓜的苦。
妈妈，黑鸡蛋太苦了，不好吃。
苦的。
苦。
Next we have spicy or 辣。Here's an example you might need if you aren't used to eating that much spicy food. 这麻辣火锅太辣了，请给我来点水。
什么呢，李一鸣？
这太辣了。
And then we have salty or 咸。So for example, 这道卤肉饭有点咸，给我加点白饭吧。
哇，这个皮特别咸。
And then we have 淡 or bland. So for example, 这道炒肉有点淡，要不加点酱油吧。
味道上就是属于比较淡，没有那种酱油啊、醋啊什么的。
And then we have 鲜, which means fresh, and we use this most commonly to describe seafood kind of things. So it's like the opposite of 腥 fishy, basically. 这味增汤鲜味十足。
我们这个汤特别鲜。
So with all these individual ways of describing flavor, remember you can adjust it with words like 不 not or 不太. So for example, 这太辣了. This is so spicy. Or 这有点辣. This is a little spicy. Or 这不辣. This is not spicy.
他家这个油泼辣子，辣椒很辣。在陕西吃油泼面，这个油泼辣椒是只香不辣。那他家这个辣子，我觉得还是有点辣的。
And you can also use this special word to describe certain flavors, which is 浓 or 浓郁. For example, 我受不了这道菜的浓郁酸辣味儿. So 浓郁酸辣, basically saying not just 酸辣, not just sour, spicy, but it's 浓郁香辣味儿. It's like super thick, heavy, spicy, sour sort of taste.
切开看一下内部结构。 光滑细腻，没有气泡，焦糖的味道非常浓郁。
And as you get more into Chinese food, and maybe you actually visit China and different parts of China and experience the different cuisines around the country, you'll start to notice that different provinces have different types of food. So for example, if you go to Shanxi province, you'll notice that people love sour food, things like pickles. And if you go to Sichuan, you'll notice that they absolutely are obsessed with spicy food. If you go to Jiangsu, you'll notice they love sweet food. And if you go up north to Beijing sort of area, it starts to get a bit more salty. Although I've got to say, salty food is kind of everywhere in China. It's just that Beifang, the northern area of China, seems to be particularly obsessed with it. So those are sort of the main ways to talk about food, but it's not just about flavor, smell, and the way things look. We also need to talk about the texture of food, the 口感, literally mouth feel. So one of the most common words you'll hear is 嫩. This is a particular way of describing meat, and this means tender. And it's only used, of course, to describe meat. So for example, 这个牛排好嫩. And if you want to describe meat as being tough or overcooked, you would say 老, which literally means old.
哦，这肉还是很嫩呢，
嫩，
好细哦。
And if you want to talk about the softness or hardness of food in general, and well, anything in Chinese really, you say 硬 for hard and 软 for soft. So for example, 这面包好软。入口即溶is like melts in your mouth. Or 这饭太硬了, this rice is too hard. 你下次加点水吧. Next time, add more water.
而且这个冷饭还要偏硬一点点，太软了也不行。
If you want to say crispy or crunchy, you would say 脆 or 脆脆的. So for example, 这道北京烤鸭的鸭皮好脆. So by the way, that's my favorite all-time Chinese dish, Peking duck. And you notice I doubled up the 脆 there, 脆脆. You can do that with tons of different describing words or adjectives in Chinese, not just about food. So instead of saying 辣 or 酸, you could say 辣辣的 or 酸酸的. And all it does is basically adds a more casual, sort of playful tone to it.
你可以沾着吃，会有酸酸甜甜辣辣的感觉。
And this final texture-related word that I want to teach you is one that I only personally sort of internalized and mastered very recently, and it is 爽口. Literally means refreshing to the mouth. Now, as far as I know, this is mainly used to describe cold things, and it could be liquids or solids. So when my wife makes 拍黄瓜, like smashed cucumber with like some 芝麻酱, it's really cool and crunchy, and it's perfect to have with like a spicy dish. It's very 爽口. But you can also use it for liquids. So for example, 这鲜榨的橙汁太爽口了，再来一杯吧.
入口第一个感觉是蚝油的鲜，调味中的甜，只有后味才会有一点点苦的感觉。虽然看起来不太起眼的样子，但味道真的非常好，可以算是滋味丰富，但又很清爽，很爽口，夏天吃非常舒服。
Now, the words I've shared in this video so far are essential, and they'll cover pretty much 99% of all situations where you need to describe food. But I want to share with you some bonus phrases that you can also use, including one word that is very unique to Chinese people that I have a lot of affection for. So this first one here is about the portion size. So you could say 分量刚好. 分量 is the portion or the amount that your food that you get, and you could say 刚好, which means just right. Or if you like, you could say 太少, like not enough, and 太多, too much.
馅料的分量刚刚好，也是16个。
And this next one is one I learned from my late father-in-law, who shared some rib soup that he made for me, which was incredibly salty. And he said, 怎么样? As in, how is it? And my wife told me to say this phrase, 咸淡正好, which literally means salty, bland, just right. Now, while this wasn't actually true in that moment, like my head was about to explode by how salty this meal was, I just told him, actually, yes, the amount of salt in this meal is perfect. 咸淡正好。
不咸不淡，葱油拌面啊，大家学起来，做起来。
Now, this very final word is a word that is very unique to Chinese people, and my wife and I have a private joke with this because obviously she's Chinese and she uses this word a lot every time either I make her food or we go and eat some sort of Western food. And it is ni, which is short for 油腻. And it's to do with food being too rich or oily or fatty or greasy, something that just makes you feel a little bit sick if you eat too much of it.
然后这个番茄汤非常的鲜美又不油腻，完全就是我的最爱。
So because Chinese food is generally a lot healthier than the West, like they use a ton of vegetables with every meal. And in the West, we tend to eat a lot more heavier food, like things with a lot of cream and pastry and pasta and salt. So Chinese people, even if they love Western food, often they can't eat a lot of it because they'll find it too neat. It will make them feel kind of sick. In fact, my wife has said this so much that we have like a private joke where I do the impression of the knights who say "ni" from Monty Python every time we eat Western food.
Please, no more. We will find you a shrubbery.
That's a pretty good impression of what Chinese people sound like when they're in an Italian restaurant, by the way. Now, if you are eating something that is very ni, it's a good idea to have some light food to help you 解腻 or relieve the greasy richness. Things like tea, things like cucumber, light, crunchy, 爽口 food works very well for this. So for example, 你刚吃了炸鸡，来喝杯茶解腻吧。
这黄瓜我跟你讲，特别解腻。
Alright guys, so that's everything you need to know about describing food in Chinese, at least everything you need to know for 99.9% of situations. Hope you found that helpful. Watch this one next, and I will see you there. Bye-bye.